Alright, so I am doing a bit of a pregnancy Q&A today. So thank you everyone who sent me questions from Instagram yesterday. I really appreciated that, and not only were they fun questions and I'm excited to answer them today, but also it got me thinking about some important things that I probably need to start thinking about, because when this video is uploaded I'll have just reached 32 weeks. And so I am nearing the finish line, which I am very excited about. But I just wanted to jump into these. I wanted to apologize. I was not able to get to them all. There were a lot of questions. So I maybe got to about half of them, but I have this page, and I kind of tried to go through some reoccurring ones that I received, and then some ones that I felt like were pretty relevant, because there are certain questions that I honestly just don't have answers to. I don't know the answers to. Especially I got some questions about like fertility struggles and such. I don't have any advice. With both of the pregnancies that I've had, the actual conceiving part has been very easy. So I am not the right person to ask. But that being said, let's jump into these questions. So the first one that I wanted to answer is, how did you find out you were pregnant? This is fun. So I was expecting to be pregnant actually, because about mid-November, my husband and I decided we wanted to have another baby. And so we were trying, and by the end of December, I was already starting to feel sick and starting to wonder if I was pregnant. And so I took a pregnancy test, because with neither of my pregnancies have I been the type that wants to wait until like after my period doesn't happen for 2 weeks I take a test. No, I'm like instantly very curious and instantly taking a test. And so I took a test, and it was definitely negative. And I put it in the garbage, and then probably 2 hours later I walked into the room and I was like, you know what, I'll just pull it out and look at it again. I pulled it out and looked at it, and there was the slightest faint positive line. I was like, what? So I waited a couple of days, didn't tell anyone, and I was just starting to feel pretty sick. And so I asked my mom, she lives right next door, I asked her if she would get me another pregnancy test because she was going into town. And so she got me one, and I took it, and I was definitely pregnant. And so I still waited a couple of days to tell my husband, because I had this whole grand plan of how I was gonna tell him. We were gonna do like this photo shoot, and I was gonna have my camera set up, and I was gonna film it all, and I was gonna have this sign that said like baby number 2 or something like that. Needless to say, I ended up telling him by him just walking into my daughter's room and me asking him if we could fit a second crib in her room. And so it was nothing magnificent, but I was excited to tell him and couldn't think of a better way to get him outside in front of the camera without him being suspicious. So that's how I found out that I was pregnant. Okay, the next question is nutrition tips for pregnancy. Obviously, I'm no nutritional expert, but the two biggest things I would say that I think are super important is my midwives always emphasize the importance of eating tons of protein. And so my goal is to eat 60 to 80 grams of protein a day, which to some people probably doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, it feels like so much food. And so the only way really I can manage to eat that much is if I have tons of eggs at breakfast and like sausage or something like that. Basically, I have to eat meat or eggs at every single meal in order to fit in that much, and it's still really hard. And so usually if I make it to 60 or 70 grams of protein, I'm happy and I feel like it's good enough, and it's been a real struggle. But that is my number one tip that my midwives have really encouraged me to do. The second thing though is I've been trying to eat a lot of greens and a lot of salads and a lot of things that are high in iron, because one reason is because when my test scores came back, they were actually fairly low on the iron side, as well as I hemorrhaged with Caroline. And so anything I can do to hopefully build up that supply is kind of also a goal of mine. And so those are my two biggest nutritional tips, besides taking, you know, your prenatals and drinking lots of water. Those type of things are really important. What does it feel like being pregnant? Like feeling a baby on the inside. It's a strange feeling. I didn't feel either of the babies at all until I was about 17 weeks, and then 17 weeks all of a sudden I could start feeling it moving. And I would say at first it feels very much just like if your stomach is really gurgly. You know when you I don't know, when you eat certain foods or whatever and your stomach just feels like it's just like kind of turning, not in like a sick way, but just like things are moving in there. It feels a ton like that, and at least to me. And so it's very hard for me actually to distinguish until it gets a little more distinct, whether it's the baby or whether it's just my stomach, because I feel like I have a really loud, active stomach, if there's such a thing. And then later on, like right now at this stage, I can very distinctively feel these painful arms and legs like kicking and punching my sides. It's an interesting feeling, but it happens so gradually. I don't think you realize how weird it is until you're not pregnant anymore. And it's like, whoa, my stomach is so still all the time. It's kind of strange. Did you ever feel nervous / not prepared for motherhood? How to combat this? Oh yes, I still feel nervous. Especially when it comes to having 2 kids. But especially with my first, I felt extremely nervous. Honestly, I think I thought I was a lot more prepared than I was, because as soon as I had the baby, I realized how unprepared I was to become a mother. So how did I combat this? There's a couple of different things I would suggest. One of them is, at least for myself, I found comfort researching like methods for how to homeschool. Even though at the time, like, I'm hardly pregnant with my first, those type of things, just researching, you know, homeschooling styles, parenting styles, looking at other parents, asking advice, asking people's opinions on sleep training and all these different things, reading different books. Whether or not I do all the things that I learned or researched doesn't matter. Just something about educating yourself is, I think, a comforting feeling. And I do it to this day about things that honestly we're probably not going to have to make decisions about for still a lot of years, you know, like schooling or something like that, just because I think it's interesting and I enjoy learning. And so I think that's the thing that kind of helps. Another big thing though is praying. Obviously prayer is very, very powerful and can help a lot, and helps me a lot to this day when I feel inadequate or nervous about being a mom. Also, with my first, I had not planned to be pregnant. I did not want to be pregnant for a couple more years. It was a surprise. And so the nerves were that much higher, and I was that much more nervous about becoming a mom, and that much more afraid of it and dreading the change. And now that I am one, I feel so blessed, and I'm so excited to have another baby. But definitely with the first one especially, I felt really nervous. And the last thing, nothing prepares you for motherhood like becoming a mother does. And so if all else fails, just become a mother and figure it out, because I think you can read all the books and get all the advice and listen to all the things, but until you actually do it, there's something about getting your hands in there and actually being a mom that I think helps a lot with just feeling nervous and feeling unprepared. That being said, I still feel nervous and unprepared sometimes. How do you plan to be intentional with your toddler and husband with a newborn? I thought that was a really good question, and it made me think, because I haven't really thought about that too much yet. One way that I'm planning to be intentional with my toddler and husband, which seems a little strange, is just to let myself fully recover. And so when I am back up on my feet, I have the energy to invest in both of them, hopefully. And I have the stamina and I have the vigor and health that I need to have in order to pour into them. And so that's like kind of, I guess, a way that I want to be intentional with them, is just by letting myself rest and recover so that I can jump back in to the type of wife and mom that I want to be to both of them, hopefully as healthily and quickly as possible. Yes, how are you preparing Carrie to be a big sister? We talk about the baby all the time, and we really include her in our conversations about our family. Carrie loves to put her hand on my belly and talk about the baby inside. She thinks that there's a baby inside her stomach. And so that's kind of how we're preparing Carrie, is just by really talking about the baby like it's already a part of our family, because it is in a way. And the other thing that's worked out to be a really big blessing is that my mom, who lives on the same property as us, just got a puppy. And so Carrie's having to learn what being gentle means, and that does not come naturally for her. And she, with no ill intentions, will be trying to pick up the dog by its tail and do all this stuff. And so we're having to teach her, you have to be gentle, and this is what gentle means, and I think it's really great that she can learn on a dog rather than on a human. So that's kind of the other way we're preparing Carrie to be a big sister. What are you doing to prepare for postpartum now with having a little one and a newborn? This is a really good question, and one of the ones that I was like, you know what, I have not put a ton of thought into that. I just started the other day this massive running to-do list of things that I need to do to prepare for the baby. And so this is the list, but the main things I want to focus on is having the house thoroughly organized again, decluttered, and cleaned. Those are like my 3 main things that I really am going to start focusing on it at, I think, about 35 weeks. So besides that, the other big thing that I want to focus on is just having lots of food and snacks and stuff for Carrie and my husband. Okay, so besides having the house kind of cleaned and organized, hopefully very thoroughly, and then having lots of snacks on hand, I definitely have a few things still that I want to get just to have. And then there's like all the preparation I want to do of like washing up all the baby clothes and putting the car seat in the car and just little things like that. But the main things are the house and the food. So, what type of birth do you prefer? Water, hospital, etc.? Okay, well, I've only had one baby so far, so I don't really have a lot of experiences to compare it to, but I definitely really enjoyed a lot of things about my first birth. I had it outside of the hospital. I had it at a birthing center. I had it with midwives. I had a doula. My husband was kind of the coach, my coach, and then I did do a water birth. And despite the fact that, like, yes, I tore and I hemorrhaged and there were some really hard things about the recovery, the actual birth format and the people that were there was 100% exactly what I would like. And so that's definitely what I personally prefer. Here's another question. What pregnancy, birth, motherhood books do you read, if any? The biggest thing I would recommend that was so helpful was that we actually took a class called the Bradley Method class, and it was so good on just really thoroughly educating you about what your body's doing during labor. It removed a ton of fears that I had going into being pregnant, anticipating labor and birth. It was just so good. And I think though, if you can't take that class, that you can still get the book. I think there's a book called the Bradley Method. And so I would really encourage that. I haven't read the book, but the class was phenomenal. It was like by far the best thing I did to prepare for labor. The other thing that I did a lot of, especially with the first pregnancies, I watched a ton of birth videos, and I know that can sound kind of scary, but just having a general idea of what's happening and knowing that this is kind of normal, I think really helped me not be so nervous going into labor. So I did watch a lot of videos, and that birthing class was excellent. I didn't read a ton of books though. How are you preparing spiritually? That's a really good question. Spiritually, I'm really not doing anything too different. I do my devotions every day, read my Bible. Right now I'm working through a book. But I guess the biggest thing is that I really try to pray a lot, especially if I'm nervous. Sometimes just laying in bed at night, you know, your mind can kind of wander. And whenever I start to feel nervous, I'll pray. I especially pray about specific things. Like I'm praying that I won't tear. I'm praying for specific things like that that really cause me a lot of fear. And I think that can definitely help, because I was unusually calm going into labor with Caroline, and the whole pregnancy I had been kind of nervous. And I think it was a lot because of prayer. So that's kind of the only thing that I'm doing differently. What physical things are you doing for your body? This is a really good question. With Caroline, I basically did nothing different with my body. This pregnancy is totally different though, because I've had a lot more pelvic floor problems. And so just about a month ago, I went into a pelvic floor specialist because I realized I know nothing about this area of my body. And I just realized how much more that I do not know when I went in. And I really encourage you, if you're having any type of problems in that area, to go in and get checked out, and they will give you a whole list of exercises to do, and I've already felt a big difference. And so I'm doing a ton of different exercises to prepare my body physically, as well as, of course, taking prenatals. I take calcium, vitamin D. I need to start taking trace minerals, and then at like 35 weeks I'm going to start to take raspberry leaf tea every day because that strengthens your uterus and makes your contractions more strong, and also is a good source of iron for bleeding and such. So those are the main things that I'm doing to prepare my body. What is your ideal birth plan? Sorry, Carrie's waking up, so we'll see how long this can go. My ideal birth plan would be to labor at home, hopefully kind of distracted working until I can't be distracted anymore. And then my husband to take us into the birthing clinic, which is about an hour and 11 minutes away. And so I would hope that I'm not in serious pain during the drive, but I also don't want to be there forever laboring. And so whenever the midwives recommend going in there, and then I really loved with Caroline that my midwives were very hands-off. That's how I wanted them to be. It was my husband and I basically up until I started pushing, and then the midwives were like full on intense mode, and it was so good. And so that's really what I would like. I much prefer privacy, and then actually giving birth in the tub is what I would prefer, and that's what I did with Caroline, and I really liked it. My ideal birth plan also would hopefully not include tearing, hemorrhaging, or prolapsing, because I have a grade 2 prolapse at the moment that I've really been trying to strengthen. And so if those 3 things don't happen and I have a healthy baby and I'm doing okay, that is my ideal birth. But really, as long as the baby is healthy, it will be okay in the end. But that's kind of what I would prefer. How did you handle the mental/emotional transition of life before and after having kids? Do you have an outlet? Actually, the transition between going from not having a child to having a child was somewhat difficult. The biggest thing was that Carrie was very colicky, and she screamed and cried like the first 6 months of her life, and it took me about that long to figure out what exactly was wrong. And so it was honestly pretty difficult. Those were definitely the hardest months of being a mom so far that I've experienced, just because there was so much screaming and crying that I didn't have any clue what it was being caused by, and I had a ton of problems nursing. And so it was a really hard first 6 months, and I think that made the transition much more difficult because Carrie wasn't an easy baby. It's so worth it though. I love it now. There's no way I would have waited now to have kids longer like I had originally planned. I love being a mom, and I love having Caroline, and we're super excited to have another one. An outlet for you? Yes, I did have an outlet. One of my outlets was YouTube, actually. I started it like 2 months, I think, after I had Caroline, and it was so much fun, and it gave me something different to focus on when she was napping, or something different to kind of put some energy into when I had the time, and it was just really fun. I think it's super helpful having an outlet or two. I have a lot of outlets that I really enjoy doing that aren't necessarily connected to motherhood, and I think it's helpful. What's been your favorite part of this pregnancy? One of my favorite parts of both of my pregnancies is like the sweet spot between maybe like 17 weeks and probably where I am right about now, like 32 weeks, where you don't feel super pregnant yet. I'm just starting to feel really pregnant. But I love that stage in between where you're not sick anymore, you don't have tons of nausea, you're not throwing up all the time, you feel good, you have energy, but you're not massive yet. That's a really nice feeling. But that being said, the stage I'm entering right now, yes, I am a lot more pregnant looking. Here's my belly. 32 weeks, I think, when you see this video is how far along I'll be. All that being said, there is something a little bit fun about the last couple weeks of pregnancy, kind of the next stage I feel like I'm entering into, just because it's kind of the fun part of like, oh, I get to pull out Carrie's old clothes and start washing them up and get things ready, and just you start to feel really excited to not be pregnant, and you also feel really excited to meet your baby. So I'm excited about that part too. In a way, I think it's a really fun stage, even though I think it's also kind of the more painful stage besides the nausea stage of the first trimester. So how do you calm nausea? Ooh, nausea is the worst. Okay, the first thing that I did with this pregnancy is as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I started taking milk thistle. And obviously, I'm not a doctor. Ask your doctor or your midwife first if this is okay. But basically what milk thistle does is it kind of cleans out your liver, and by cleaning out your liver, it's supposed to help with the nausea. I definitely think it helped though. I think it helped me not feel as sick, and I didn't throw up as much this time as with my first pregnancy, so I think it helped. The other thing is trying to eat, and I know this is terrible advice. I hate when people give this advice, but it actually does help a little bit if you can eat as early on in the day as possible. I definitely did notice a difference with not feeling quite as bad the rest of the day if I just ate even the slightest, smallest amounts of things throughout the day rather than waiting a while after I got up. Another thing that a friend of mine said she does that I thought was really smart is she would actually take a handkerchief and put peppermint essential oils on it and tie it around her face so that she wouldn't have to smell different like food aromas and such. And I thought that was actually pretty smart. The terrible thing is I feel like in the end you just kind of have to survive and make it through because it's so hard. These last two kind of tie together. Dealing with first trimester fatigue while having another little one, and then the next one is how would you juggle being a mom, wife, homemaker, and being pregnant? Let me just preface it by saying this. My first trimester is pretty miserable. I feel pretty sick. I am 100% exhausted, but I do not have morning sickness as bad as some women that I know, and I am really thankful for that. I know some women and they throw up literally like 17 times a day. And so that being said, obviously I think it's a little bit different based on what type of morning sickness and pregnancies you have. For myself, especially during the first trimester, my goal was to do a load of laundry a day, do the dishes once a day, and try to make a meal for my husband at dinner and pick up the house. But that was all I did for like the first 2 months at least. And it felt almost physically impossible to even do just those simple things. And so I think just have a ton of grace. Have a ton of grace with yourself. Realize it's like having the flu. I mean, what do you do when you have the flu? You rest, you drink fluids, you relax, you don't exert yourself, you don't see people that at the moment you don't want to see, you don't maybe keep up with the laundry perfectly. Just realize it's like that, but it's like 2 or 3 months long. And so give yourself some grace as much as is possible. And so that's kind of what I did during the first trimester that I thought was helpful. And I think it was actually beneficial to my daughter in a way because she kind of had to become my helper. And so I would have her run over and get me things when I was laying on the couch. And she had to just kind of be, I felt kind of bad, but she had to be more content with me just kind of laying around, and maybe we would look at a book together. Maybe, you know, I would read her a story, but I was definitely not overly active with her for the first couple of months. And it's just part of life. Now though, kind of to answer the second one, how do you juggle being a mom, wife, homemaker, and being pregnant? Now that I'm out of the first trimester, it doesn't feel nearly as difficult. And I feel like in comparison, I feel like it's actually fairly easy right now. And so we'll see how it goes though once the baby is born. I'm sure I'm going to be thrown for a total loop and have to really rediscover a lot of stuff. So thank you so much for asking all those questions. That's all I'm going to be able to get to today. This is a very long video. I appreciate you all so much, and this really gave me a lot to think about myself that I realized I need to start thinking about. So I love you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you hopefully next week and in my next video, and kind of start to anticipate some really deep, clean, organized videos, because that's kind of the next big thing on my to-do list in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for watching. Bye.